All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andres Quintanilla, the Program Manager for Examples of Excelencia here at Excelencia in Education. Just want to thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar on Examples of Excelencia, highlighting program stories. For today's webinar, joining me is Hugo Teruel. He is the Executive Director of the Latin American Recruitment and Educational Services Program at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Otherwise known as LARES. LARES is a program that Excelencia recognized back in 2014 as an example of Excelencia in the baccalaureate category. So for today's webinar, we'll be going over our efforts to recognize effective institutional practices that serve Latino students. We do this through our Examples of Excelencia program. We'll also have the opportunity, as I mentioned, to learn a little bit about LARES, their efforts to serve Latino students at UIC. And so before we get started, I do want to go over some programming notes for today's webinar. On either side of your screen, you should notice a GoToWebinar toolbar. Now in this toolbar is a section labeled questions. If you have any questions at any point throughout this presentation, please use this space to submit your questions. We'll be monitoring the space, and at the end of this webinar, we'll have an opportunity to address those questions from the audience. Our graduate intern, Carly Gordon, will read off your questions during our Q&A. Earlier today, you should have received a reminder email for today's webinar. Within that reminder email, we had the contact information for one of our other graduate interns, Jeffrey Ramos. He is available should you have any technical difficulties throughout the rest of the presentation. We should be good to go, but if anything does come up, please reach out to Jeffrey. I've also asked him to put his contact information in the chat section. So in the toolbar, you should see a chat section that'll have his contact information as well. We will be recording the webinar, so following today's presentation, we'll follow up with a link for you to access this. We'll also send it to everyone else that's registered, so if you have to hop off for today, feel free to reach out if you don't get that recording. We should make that available either later today or sometime tomorrow. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about Examples of Excelencia, why we bring attention to programs that work for Latino students. We're going to ask all of you all to help us find what works, and then we'll hear from LARES and talk about their program, and again, how that program is serving Latinos within their community, and we'll open up the floor to questions. So Excelencia in Education as an organization, we first began 15 years ago in 2004. So this year marks our quinceañera. We're celebrating it in June. I'll share a little bit more about that and how to register for that event. And throughout the past 15 years, our mission has been to try to accelerate Latino student success in higher education. And we believe that part of this mission and part of trying to bring attention to what works is important. So through Examples of Excelencia, we bring attention to effective practices that work for Latino students. Examples of Excelencia as a program started in 2005, again, to bring attention to what's working for Latinos. And we've recognized over 330 programs that are using evidence-based practices to ensure Latino student success. These programs are using data in order to track and show how effective they are in serving students. As I've mentioned, accelerating Latino student success is our mission. We believe there are sort of three core efforts or pillars that institutions should consider when serving Latino students. That's data, practice, and leadership. Using data to track student success, practice or how you're serving your Latino students, and dedicated leadership to show that there's leadership in support of these efforts. So Examples of Excelencia, I know on the screen I have three different things. Example of Excelencia works to inform practice, policy, and leadership. Again, practice how we're serving our Latino students, what's important when we're looking at our specific community, and using cultural competency in serving those students. Institutional practices are important, and we believe that bringing attention to these programs helps frame those efforts. We also hope to influence local, state, and federal policies surrounding our Latino students. And again, we want to frame how institutional leadership should think about serving Latinos. Bringing attention to these efforts allows us the opportunity to learn about program practices and the unique ways in which programs serve their respective students and communities. different practices can yield different results, right? So within a specific context. So by sharing how one program is effective in serving their students, it allows us to share these practices to help influence how other institutions can consider serving students. In general, this helps us inform the broader space of higher education. But when we're talking about the impact that we're trying to bring to programs directly, there's a couple things that we're trying to do for these programs. This direct impact for programs helps us bring awareness to some programs that may otherwise go unnoticed. So through examples of Excelencia, we do recognize a wide variety of programs, from large multi-million-dollar granted programs to small community-based efforts that rely a lot on local foundations or local investors in their efforts. So through our efforts, we spotlight programs in the hopes that it attracts the attention of others that can invest into those programs. And this investment, as we all know, a lot of us will rely on money to try to replicate and scale these programs. And so by bringing attention to those that are going unnoticed, hopefully we'll increase that awareness and help them connect with other partners, other foundations, other organizations that'll help them push through with their mission. And in doing so, we're creating this network of common cause. This allows us to connect practitioners and institutional leaders together to help accelerate Latino student success. So that acceleration is not just a single organization or an institution's sole responsibility. It really requires a nationwide partnerships. So overall, through examples of Excelencia, we aim to inform and improve the way that we're serving our Latino students. So that's the gist of why we do this, why we try to bring attention to these efforts. Earlier this year, we had a national call for nominations, so we are looking for these programs. I'm going to briefly go over our examples of Excelencia process. It's a 3-step process. It's very simple for you to nominate a program, and we rely heavily on our community to let us know what's out there, what's working for our students. So all you have to do is go to edexcelencia.org/examples. If you know about a program, or if you want to nominate your own program, please do so. We just ask for contact information in this first sort of nomination step. Once we learn about your program, or we receive your contact information from that nomination, we reach out to the programs individually and ask for more information on those programs. So when you're nominating, you don't need to know too much about the program. If you're just aware of them, or if you no longer work with them or something like that, the nomination form is just so that we can get a sense of what's out there, right? This submission or this profile form is more in-depth of what the program is doing. It's actually pretty brief. It's 2 pages. We're asking for a description history of the program, an overview of their staff and budget, their mission and goals, what practices they're using to serve their Latino students, and then we do ask for evidence of effectiveness. So the nomination deadline is March 15th, and nominated programs have until March 29th to submit their nominations. So please do nominate programs as soon and as early as possible to give them enough time to submit those profiles. We recognize programs in 4 different categories: the associate, baccalaureate, and graduate academic levels, and we also recognize programs at community-based organizations. So following the closing of our profile deadline, Excelencia staff reads and reviews all submitted profiles, and we select a small set of finalists. This set of finalists is then forwarded to an external selection committee that picks one example of Excelencia per category. Our external selection committee is made up of various higher education professionals in different spaces. We have folks from foundations, different associations. We have representation from graduate programs, folks that are working at community colleges or working at traditional 4-year, things like that, to try to have a pretty diverse group of reviewers, if you will. And so I want to go over a little bit of the ways that we're recognizing programs. So as I mentioned, we do have a full list of finalists, and programs, typically we have about 20 or so finalists every year. And programs that are recognized as finalists are included in our annual What Works for Latino Students in Higher Education compendium. They're featured in our online Growing Works database, and our database is a pretty nice tool for you to look for other practices across the country that are working for Latinos. So within the database, you're able to search by program practice type. So if you're looking for mentoring programs or STEM focused programs or transfer programs, you're able to do that. And then you can also search by state. So it's a pretty good tool. I would encourage everyone to just go check it out. So programs that are selected as finalists are featured in the database. So through the examples process, we're able to identify these programs and filter them into the database. Recognized programs are also shared with their member of Congress. So whatever jurisdiction they're in, we reach out to their congressional representative and just let them know about the efforts that's going on within their district. We also offer a digital badge of recognition, and we feature these programs on various social media posts on our website, and they help inform a lot of our publications and research. As I mentioned earlier, we do recognize 4 examples of Excelencia in one of each of those 4 categories. So these 4 examples, they're invited to speak at our Celebración de Excelencia and our Accelerating Latino Student Success Institute. We're hosting those in the fall on October 24th and 25th. The programs also receive a small financial contribution of $5,000 for which they can use for any programming efforts that they see fit. And so that's sort of like the advertised way in which we try to bring attention to the programs, right? So we're announcing our list of finalists sometime in the summer, and then the 4 examples of Excelencia get announced in the fall during our events. But through this process, we're also able to identify a lot of other different programs. So another way that we do this is by having a list of honorable mentions. So honorable mentions are typically programs that are right on the cusp of being selected as finalists or have a unique approach in serving students that isn't quantifiable as quantifiable as other efforts. We also recognize programs as programs to watch. So programs to watch are these young up-and-coming programs. They use practices that are based on research and that we've seen are successful in other communities and institutions, and they've replicated them in their own institutions. Now they have some data, but the data is limited because of the infancy of the program itself. So by bringing attention to these programs to watch, we feel like it's necessary for the space itself to monitor these programs as they improve on all their efforts. And finally, this entire process, as I mentioned earlier, helps us inform a lot of our publications. A lot of our research that we release is shared with, and no pun intended, but examples of effective programs that are working. So we list these programs as examples of what others can do in their space when we're talking about specific topics or when we're discussing our research. So just very quickly want to go through this timeline. Again, nominations, please nominate programs by March 15th. We have a webinar scheduled for March 6th. Now, this webinar is going to go a little more detailed into the profile process. We'll have one of our selection committee members share their perspective on what they look for when they're reviewing profiles. So that'll be a good opportunity for those of you that are interested in submitting for examples of Excelencia. And then the profiles themselves are due by March 29th. So again, please try to get those nominations in as early as possible so that folks have time to submit the profiles. You'll notice that there's some dates here in gray. This is sort of our internal timeline that I'm sharing with all of you. We'll typically review profiles around April through May. The list of finalists should be sent over to our selection committee between June and July, and then our announcement for the finalists will be sometime in the summer. As I mentioned, we are celebrating our quinceañera. Please check our events page, edexcelencia.org/events. The registration for the event is not up yet, but there is an announcement, so please check that space. You'll also see a listing for our Celebración de Excelencia, which is set for October 24th, and then our Accelerating Latino Student Success Institute, or ALAS Institute. We love acronyms, right? So that's set for October 25th. So please watch that space and help us find what works. Again, go to the website, edexcelencia.org/examples. Click nominate, you'll go through the form, share what works, let us know what your program's doing. And so we look forward to finding those programs and bringing more attention to them. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, we are joined by Hugo Teruel. He is the Executive Director of the LARES program. So we're going to turn it over to Hugo in just a bit, going to give him a nice proper introduction. Hugo has been an advocate for access to higher education for Latinos for over 30 years in the state of Illinois. As Executive Director of LARES at the University of Illinois, Chicago, he has been responsible for the supervision and administration of LARES, and implementation of its mission and long-term goals. UGO has managed recruitment and retention initiatives and works to develop and maintain relationships with community organizations, citywide and statewide committees that work with issues related to education, underrepresentation, and diversity. He also has extensive experience in the areas of student services, academic affairs, diversity programming, assessment, academic advising, and teaching. UGO has taught at UIC, Columbia College, and Northeastern Illinois. He has composed music for and presented workshops at all the major museums in the city, including the Art Institute of Chicago, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the National Museum of Mexican Art. Hugo, are you on the line with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Awesome. So I have a great bio of Lattice here, but I think I'm going to turn it over to you to let us know about all the great work you're doing over at University of Illinois Chicago.
Sure. First, let me thank Examples of Excelencia for inviting me. And Andres, I appreciate your generous description of my career as it's been throughout the years. So I just want to touch briefly on some of the numbers and then dive into the Lattice program, what we do, are the components that make up the Lattice program, maybe highlight some things that I think are make Lattice a bit special, or that are unique, or that we've seen that have an impact on Latino either recruitment, retention, graduation, etc. And some things that feed into the pipeline to continuing higher ed in terms of graduate school and professional school. So currently the university has a total of about 20,700 students overall. In terms of Latino undergrads, we're at close to 7,000, so we're at 33.5% of the undergraduate population. So it's a significant number, as you can see. The grand total of the university is 31,000. And that includes graduates, undergraduates, professionals, etc. In terms of incoming freshmen for fall 2018, we were at close to 40% of incoming new freshmen were Latino. That is about 1,600 students out of a total of 4,000 were Latino students. So the Latino student population is making a big impact in terms of enrollment here at UIC, and is really, I always like to say, is really maybe the savior of higher ed, as we see in different areas, not just in Chicago, but other places around the nation. The Latino population growing, the Latino student population growing, and feeding into the higher ed system. The graduation statistics may not fare as well. At UIC in particular, the Asian population in terms of graduation rates at close to 70%, Caucasian about 62.9%, Latinos at about 54%, and African American about 41% for graduation rates. The retention rates currently for Latino students is about 75%. So there's still some work we have to do in terms of retention and graduation. In terms of enrollment, we're doing pretty well here at UIC, and I'll go over some of the reasons I think that have impacted that. As we all know, it's hard to take credit for everything that involves Latinos just because we're a Latino program that targets Latino students. There's a lot of initiatives here that work together to, I think, target that population, and have led to the increase in enrollment for sure, and some of the other successes. So some of the components of the Lattice program are listed here in the slide. There's recruitment, there's the admissions component, retention component, which is probably the largest part of this, and more intricate. And then the component that really is a pipeline that includes some of the retention initiatives that encourages students to go on to graduate school and professional school. I'll talk a little bit more in depth as we go along, and excuse me if there's some overlap. In terms of recruitment, we do all the normal things that everybody should be doing in terms of going to college fairs, we target in particular schools with large Latino student populations. They're significant. We get many requests to come to areas that aren't necessarily in our targeted territory, but we try to accommodate those requests. So some come from further out of the city of Chicago. We kind of target the greater metropolitan area. But as we gain, as LARES gains in terms of notoriety and people just knowing about the program, we're getting more and more requests throughout the state to come in and work with the students there. And as Excelencia in Education has assisted us getting some national recognition in terms of what works for Latino students. And so we try to accommodate those requests as best we can to reach out to Latino students, Latino population, to the community when they make those requests. In terms of admissions, we also do play a role in the admissions component. Our role has been curtailed a bit from years ago. We had a little more involvement, and through some incidents and events that have happened, our engagement in admissions has been cut back a little bit, not due to necessarily our decision, but we still are very involved in terms of guiding students through the admissions process. It becomes very important in terms of first generation students and assisting them through filling out the application and making sure they have the right forms filled out and making sure they know what forms exist, in particular for maybe undocumented students. The retention component, as I mentioned, is the most complex. And really, we have another image that I was going to use, which I didn't use, but it shows sort of a circle because I feel it shows these components in a circle because I feel it's sort of a cyclical process. That is, our retention component is tied in with recruitment and vice versa in admissions. And one of the reasons is that I say that is our advisors who do academic advising are also the recruiters, which is not very common in the state of Illinois or Chicago. And I think adds a lot to what the recruiter/advisor can do in terms of assisting a student when they're out there. And it also really begins the rapport, begins that relationship with the students. So the first point of contact is in their school, in their barrio. We see them through the admissions process. They may come to us in terms of some of the workshops that we hold, in terms of filling out financial aid applications. They will see us again through orientation in the summer. We do co-advising with the colleges. So by the time a student sets foot on campus, their first semester in the fall, they see what I like to say is a friendly face, a familiar face, because we've already started to develop that rapport with the student long before they set foot on campus. And when they come in, they're a little more open to coming to meet with us, talk to us, and feel a little bit more secure in terms of coming to get assistance from our office. So if we could move to the next slide. So the yield activities, which I didn't talk about a lot, really include the telecounseling component, which a lot of institutions do now. So as you might be seeing, a lot of these activities do take place in the offices that serve the general student population, but we also play a part in each of those components, but targeting specifically Latino students. So although the admissions office does a telecounseling effort, we also do a telecounseling effort where we target Latino students in terms of answering any questions they may have about coming to UIC. These are obviously for students who've already filled out the application, and we're trying to increase that yield to make sure they enroll at UIC. UIC Ignite is an initiative started by the Office of Enrollment Services to try to impact the yield rate in terms of students that have applied to UIC. And then an event that we started years ago called Dia de la Familia, a family day where we would invite the families of the students admitted, and that can take many shapes, as you know, single parent family, etc. They bring their brothers and sisters or younger friends from the community, and really acts as not only a yield activity, but even a recruitment activity when they bring some of the youth from their communities. And we answered some more detailed questions that they may have. In particular, we still get a lot of questions from families who are maybe reticent about giving their income tax information. More importantly, for first generation families who are unfamiliar with the whole process, and from undocumented students. All our presentations are offered in English and Spanish. And this year we've doubled the effort, so we added another Dia de la Familia, as you might guess, with the growing number of Latino students coming to UIC. Next slide. I think you have to click again. Yeah. And this just gives you an idea of the trajectory of the Latino student enrollment. As you can see, it's been on a steady climb. And we've been lucky here at UIC when other institutions have seen some drops in their enrollment. In fact, across the nation, institutions of higher education have seen drops in enrollment. In the Latino student population, because UIC is sort of seen as, and this is something our current chancellor has picked up on, in the community is known as La Universidad. And when anybody says that, they know they're talking about UIC. So because of the history of the LARES program, I think has also helped in terms of recruitment, and it's really assisted us in terms of letting students know about not only the university, but of the existence of the LARES program. And briefly, and for those that don't know, the LARES program was created in the mid-70s, and it came out of really student movements back then. And some of you may remember they had sit-ins, and that happened here at UIC. University Hall was a target of a particular sit-in from Latino students who really were just making demands for access to higher ed, bilingual, bicultural services, a program to be created like the LARES program, and other programs were created during that time. And that really cemented our relationship with the community, and that continues today. And in some ways, I tell people when I'm describing the LARES program, it's for new staff that come on, it's sometimes difficult because we are part of the university. We operate in the university structure. But in some ways, we operate like a community organization because of our ties and our links with the community. And it can be good and bad for us. I mean, the community sees us as a part of the university, and the university tonight sees us as part of the community. So we walk that fine line and trying to make sure the two can come together and we can make a smooth transition. But that community component, I'll talk about a little later, and you'll see, I think, the importance and how we're still engaged with the community, and really how that helps our program. Next slide. So these are a list, and probably not a complete list, of some of the program practices. The services, as I mentioned, we do academic advising here, along with the colleges. As I said, one of the things that makes our program unique is our academic advisors are also the recruiters. And really, I can't stress enough how I think that's a crucial component in terms of developing that rapport with the student, because we see them at the point of finding out about applying to a university, helping them with the admissions process, helping them with fill out financial aid forms, seeing them again to register for classes, selecting classes, going through billing statements, explaining that to the families, their parents. And some of the parents that we see still prefer to speak Spanish as their first language. So it kind of makes them comfortable with the university environment, with the academic culture. And then, so that report continues all the way through their 4, 5, hopefully no more than 6 years till they graduate. So we really see them all through their development in terms of the academic world, in terms of academic culture, and hopefully beyond, as we have some initiatives that encourage them to go to graduate school. And obviously we encourage students to think about a career in higher ed, becoming part of the faculty, helping to diversify the faculty, which we all know needs a lot of assistance. So that's something that gives you a sense of the whole picture and why that becomes important. We also have academic tutoring and math, chemistry, English, reading and writing, academic seminars, workshops, financial aid understanding, student org involvement, which is big, and I'll touch on that I think a little later also. We do career exploration. As I mentioned, some of the services we offer are also part of the general university services, but because we target Latino students, our initiatives are a little more focused or targeted, as I mentioned. Career exploration, I mean, because we target Latino students, and a lot of corporations now are looking to either relate and communicate to their market, which is a growing Latino market, and everybody's seeing that there's some dollars to be made from the Latino market. Also because a lot of companies and organizations are looking to diversify their task force to work with these Latino markets. We get a lot of calls from companies and organizations that are looking to talk to students, prospective employees, looking to add to the diversity of their organization. So we also work in terms of career advising, as well as, you might guess, financial aid advising. Now, I always like to give a little disclaimer or a little addition that if something does get out of our realm of expertise, whether it's financial aid or career advising, career exploration, or personal advising, we keep strong ties with our contacts in each of those departments. So if something gets beyond our expertise, we have strong relationships with the career services office, with the counseling office, and with the colleges. So we don't hesitate to work together in terms of following up with students' needs, making sure that they're well served if it goes beyond our expertise, and making sure that we continue that communication, not just handing a student off to another office or department, but following up, making sure that they were able to get their needs satisfied. The opportunities that we offer in the LARES program, we're able to offer students tuition waivers, scholarships. Obviously, that's important. I think financial assistance is still a big component of the Latino community, affording a college education, affording books, affording transportation. This year alone, in the fall, I was a bit surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been. I think my advisors might have more boots on the ground in terms of being aware. But this fall semester, there were quite a few students that came to me that were either experiencing homelessness or weren't getting enough food to eat, and we were able to assist in those ways also. So there are a multitude of factors when we're looking at, well, how do we increase retention at graduation? It is about advising, it is about, providing academic workshops, but one of the things that we practice is a holistic advising. It's about the whole student, and that student's life is academic, but it's also personal, it's also job, it's also relationships, food to eat, place to stay. So there aren't a lot of offices or institutions that work in that capacity. Some may work with part of that. I haven't found many, but that include the academic advising, the financial aid advising, the career advising, and the personal advising. And we try to do a bit of that here in the LARES program. It is getting more difficult, if some of you are thinking, well, how do they deal with all those members? Now, all the Latino students don't come to the LARES program. Why that is, we're not sure. We're in the process of creating a survey to find out how to serve the students' needs a little bit better, what we can do to improve. If they did all come to the LARES program, yes, we would be swamped and we don't have the staff to work with them all. But I think, again, we're able to work with a component that really needs some assistance. And we also work with the high achievers, so it's not just students that need support in terms of their academic courses or those things. We also work with high achieving students, and I can talk about those things later. We're able to provide book vouchers. We do sponsor student attendance, and this is done through some of our work with the Latino student organizations, attending conferences for leadership development, fellowships and internships. We have some programs that work with that. Also, we get, as I mentioned, companies, organizations that contact us looking for bilingual, bicultural interns or fellows. We've gotten a few this last semester from a couple of the state politicians looking for interns. It's a great experience for some of our students that are interested in public policy. We have a research component, which I think I'll talk about in a later slide. And then we also employ students as student workers. And that, I remember one year, this was a few years back, we thought, well, maybe we don't need as many students, and we also had some cutbacks on our budget, and we didn't hire as many student employees as we used to. And one of the things we noticed is that it affected attendance at some of our workshops and some of our other events, and we kind of realized, and it dawned on us, that when we have student workers, they also act as ambassadors of the program, and just in terms of getting the word out to their friends or their peers. So student workers not only assist us with work in the office, which is one of their main duties, but in terms of getting the word out, and those students, I believe in what we're doing here at LARES and see the value, and they act as ambassadors, as I mentioned, and recruiters for the office. Advising styles, I mentioned, is a holistic advising style. Individualized academic career planning, commitment to student success. We offer that supportive environment, as I talked about. Bilingual, bicultural staff, which is still important. Exposure to community-based resources, and making sure we follow up with students. Next slide, please. These are some signature programs that I'd like to highlight. One is I'll start actually in the middle with the LARES leaders. The LARES Leaders was a program we started, I think about 8-9 years ago now, something like that. And it came out of the need for, our students here are very vocal. They're very, if there's an issue, they bring it up to us. And we found that sometimes the students would be misinformed, and we wanted to make sure they were armed with knowledge and good facts, so they could, if they had issues they wanted to bring up to administration, they had a good plan of action, and there was a bit of quality control. And also we wanted to make sure we had our finger on the pulse of what the students' needs were, what they were lacking, what their issues were. So this was the idea behind developing the LARES Leaders. The LARES Leaders is a group made up of the Latino Student Organization Executive Board members. And we have about, I want to say 16, 17, it fluctuates as you might guess from year to year, Latino student orgs on campus. So what we thought is we'd bring the e-board of the Latino student organizations together in a group, and that way we would have one, we could offer leadership development, support their different student organizations and activities that they wanted to participate in, conferences they wanted to attend, and at the same time have a dialogue and communication to make sure that they knew what the issues were of that needed to be addressed, and that we knew what the issues were that they wanted to address. So that's how the LARES Leaders was born. So it takes students that are engaged and involved in student organizations. We send them to conferences. Obviously not all the students. Currently we have about 40 participating in the program. There's no stipend offered. These students participate because they want to. We do feed them. And we usually meet once, I believe it's once or twice a month. And it's usually around 5 o'clock, which has turned out to be the most convenient time for the students. And we bring in leaders, and we try to bring in leaders from different areas, whether it be politics, education, economics, the arts. We try to get leaders, Latino leaders that are doing good work, or that people they should know about in the community, in the city, in the greater metropolitan area. We've been bringing in the chancellor of the university to speak to the students. And we encourage students to, whenever there's an opportunity, we try to encourage a LARES leader to apply, or more than one whenever we can, whether it be an internship, a co-op opportunity. Last year we had one of the students that went on to become a student board of trustee member, which was a very pivotal role in the board of trustees here, and brought up some of the issues for the students. So the students are very engaged, you know, in terms of civic engagement, they're very engaged. And it's a great opportunity to also bond with their fellow students, and it's a program that's really grown. And we're looking at growing the program even more. That having a success is always complicated, because it's great that you're having success, but then you need more resources to accommodate. But we're looking at that, and I think we're able to accommodate this group currently. Now, out of that, we developed another group called the LARES Summer Institute, because we started seeing that the word was getting out, and some students that were coming in that were admitted for the fall, and the summer, prior to them starting in the fall, they wanted to be engaged in some way, learn about what the issues were. And this was geared towards some of the high achieving students that were coming in. So we created the LARES Summer Institute, and it was to promote leadership development, to have students engage civically, let them know what the issues were in the community, nationally, locally, and at the university. And we found that a lot of these students, once they finished that, asked, well, what else can I be involved in? What, you know, I want more. And so it's a natural funnel into the LARES Leaders Group. The third signature program I want to talk about is the Urban Public Policy Fellowship Program. And this is done in cooperation with another department called the Institute for Policy and Civic Engagement. And we partner with them along with the African American Academic Network, a program similar to the LARES program. And it's a leadership development program designed for underrepresented students. And it really gives them the opportunity to be introduced, and for our students really it's a continuation, introduced to research, and kind of encourages them to start thinking about graduate school. It places them in community-based organizations based on their interests. That is, and they do get paid, it's a paid internship. Along the way, they learn about doing research. They develop their abstracts, poster boards, and then that begins in the fall. Then in the spring, they have an opportunity to display their work, their research at a conference. And then we also encourage them to attend other research conferences in the area, but we always have them do one in particular here at the university. So that's a program that really is part of the pipeline to encourage them to start thinking about graduate school and doing research. Next slide. Supplemental instruction, I'll just speak out this briefly. We do offer, aside from the tutoring, supplemental instruction in English and math in these areas. We also have one, I'm just noticing I left one out, an ASP course that introduces students to research. So when students come to the university, they can sign up for the ASP course for research, and that really begins a pipeline of research. And from there, we encourage students to move on to the Urban Public Policy Fellowship Program, which I just talked about. And many of those students do continue, so that's why I mentioned that was a continuation for our students. And from there, we encourage students to participate in another program called the Summer Research Opportunity Program. And those students are kind of geared also or encouraged to become part of the LARES leaders, which many are also part of that group. And most recently, we've entered into a partnership with the University of Chicago in a bridge program that that gives us students that are graduating the opportunity to take graduate level courses at the University of Chicago. And it's paid for by a grant that was received. And some of our students, some of the LARES leaders, I think about, I want to say 5, it's a fairly new program, have already participated in that program and have gone on and continued their grad school instruction. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights that I just wanted to point out, recognitions that I think are important, because as you know, it's good to do the good work, but if nobody knows you're doing good work, you know, how useful is it? So in 2014, one of the designations we received was that of Hispanic Serving Institution, which is something we had pushed for and talked to the university administration about, and we're very happy, as you might guess, to receive that designation. The university currently has an HSI grant that works in the STEM fields, or targets students that are going into STEM fields. We also were recipient, as you know, of the example of Excelencia, which was another great honor that we received, and helps get the word out about some of the work we're doing here. And then we also received Outstanding Institutional Advising Program Award from NACADA. So those are very, very important recognitions for us. One, because it recognizes the work we do with the Latino student population, which is our focus and is important to us. And we hope that we can help others if we can in terms of the work we do and share the information. The other important recognition was NACADA, one, because it wasn't targeting Latino students in particular, but was an award that we were given for Best Institutional Advising Program, which is a key component here in the LARES program. And then in 2016, we celebrated our 40th anniversary, which is important and crucial. One of the reasons I think we've been able to exist this long, at a time when a few years back, I don't know if some of you remember, they were sort of collapsing all these programs that targeted specific ethnic groups into one umbrella. And that's a model that we really fought against. And it's really what we were born out of. Years ago, back in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, there existed a program here called the Educational Assistance Program. And that's kind of how LARES was born, is that students felt that the program wasn't serving the needs of Latino students, and that's when LARES was created. So that would have been a step backwards if we put it back into this a catch-all program. So celebrating our 40th anniversary was important to us and important to the community that supports us. Next slide, please. So this part's also very important, and I'll try to get through it quickly because I think I'm running out of time. How am I doing on time, Andres? Hello?
Yeah, we should be getting to the Q&A, but you have a few minute or so.
Okay, I'll try to wind it up. So, you know, we were born out of the struggles of students, faculty, staff, and community, and we still keep a very strong community link. But also, I just wanted to run through some of the committees and things that we do, and some things that are here at UIC. And part of it is if you see something that may be of interest to you to have at your institution, perhaps we can talk about that later. But currently there's a Chancellor's Committee on the Status of Latinos, and there's a Chancellor's Committee on the Status of for a variety of groups, African American, women, etc. But there's definitely one here for Latinos, which does a lot of good work in advocating for issues that are important for students. We previously sat on the UIC Senate, which was important to have it's important to be involved, although it can be a bit taxing to be involved in as much as you can be involved, because you get a better sense of what's happening when policies are put in place, how it's going to affect an initiative you're doing. And it's hard to know sometimes without really having your finger on the pulse or having a representative there. So we've had a representative in the University Senate, on the Chancellor's Committee, Financial Aid Appeals Committee, in the Provost Working Group, in some scholarship committees and search committees. There's another committee called Latino Committee on University Affairs, which actually was a precursor to the Chancellor's Committee, and I'll just speak about that briefly. The Latino Committee on University Affairs was created years ago and came out of just volunteers of Latinos from different departments here on campus. And then fast forward, the status committees were being formed, and the members of the Latino Committee on University Affairs felt, there was actually a meeting that was held, and felt they still wanted to continue as the LCUA because they weren't sure what the status committee was going to become, if it was just going to be a rubber stamp for administration or if they were really going to bring up real issues for Latinos. So that's sort of how we came about having two university Latino committees. Annual recognition dinner for Latino graduates is really significant in our community and for our students. It's a graduation dinner we hold downtown at the Chicago Hilton here in Chicago. We invite students, their families, faculty, community representatives. We get about 600 in attendance. And it's a great event. And the thing that separates it from, say, the general commencement activities is students are given an opportunity, however brief, they're given an opportunity to go up to a microphone, thank their abuelita, their abuelo, their advisor, whoever it is they want to thank, their significant other, their tutors. And it's a moment when the students, I think, really it hits them in terms of what they've achieved. We get a few students that cry, a few students that ask for a job. It also is a way, I think, for staff, as we know, higher ed, you don't go into higher ed to make a lot of money. It's really why we do this. It's the gratification of seeing a student that you met at their high school and their community and their barrio graduating and maybe going on to graduate school. So it's really gratifying for staff and faculty. And it's an event that's, I think it's in our 33rd year, that's really become a staple of the Latino community here. We also are engaged with scholarships. There's a committee, a statewide committee called ILACHE, Illinois Latino Council on Higher Ed, that we're members of. ASI, the Alliance of Hispanic Institution Educators, I'm a member of the board. And these are some things that keep us in touch with the community. We attend, there's a Latino Caucus in the state of Illinois. We attend their events, their functions. They're regularly in touch with us whenever there's an issue on higher ed. Today, in fact, we had a Congressman Chuy Garcia, who some of you may know, who just took the seat of Luis Gutierrez, came and visited our office here because he was a student at UIC years ago, was responsible for founding some of the programs here. I actually got his degree from UIC, but has been in touch with us throughout the years and a strong supporter. Next slide. Okay. If you have any questions, I think I went over quite a lot in terms of the Lattice program.
Thanks, Hugo. That you guys are doing amazing work for Latino students. It's evident through all your practices, all the data that you're continuing to track. So we are going to open this up to questions for anyone that has any. Again, please use the toolbar on either side of your screen. There's a section that's called questions. Carly, our graduate intern, is going to read some of them. Do we have any questions from the audience right now, Carly?
I don't have any questions from the audience yet, so we're excited to see those start rolling in. I do have a question, if you are able to answer it at this point. the question would be, how after so many years are you still able to push for that growth and gain support among different stakeholders?
That's a good question. And if I were to be direct, I would say LARES is here because of LARES. And that means the students, the faculty, the community who support the LARES program. And as I mentioned, was the cause of the creation of the LARES program. So the reason that we continue to exist is because whenever there's been, say, a possibility of downsizing or merging programs or cutting funds, community has come to our rescue or to our aid. A few years back, to give you an example, this was quite a few years ago now. As I mentioned, we have a Latino Caucus made up of state legislators. There was talk about all this collapsing. It was during a time when people were saying, "Oh, we need to merge. There should be all these separate entities that address all because of budget issues. We need to merge everything." And so it was the Latino Caucus that actually asked for a hearing here at the university, and came in, and there was about, I want to say, eight representatives. I don't think it was all the representatives in the caucus, but it was a good showing. Came, and it was like a hearing, and they asked to speak to the higher ups, the administrators, and asked them about Latino retention, graduation, support, and that went a long way to securing our livelihood for the next several years. I don't want to. The university is supportive in many ways, but I'd say, with economic situation and budget crises and other social issues that come up, it's been the Latino community, and again, that's why I can't stress enough the importance of our continued link and partnership with the community that in turn helps support us. So whenever we've needed support, they've been there for us, and because they value the work that we do in the community. And I think that's something, I've had administrators tell me, well, LARES should not be doing community work or be involved in that. But if we hadn't done that, we probably wouldn't be celebrating now it's, I think, beyond our 40th.
Thanks, Hugo.
Great, thank you so much. So we've had a couple questions come in specifically about your budget and how UIC funds programs, specifically if there's any difference between the LEADERS and the Summer Institute program. Just generally, if you can speak to your budget and how you manage that budget through the different programs.
Well, we're funded by the state budget, so we have a direct funding line from the state, and that it was a good thing. That's a good thing. It's hard money, and to give you an idea, it's different than another colleague of ours, another department here on campus that is funded partially on hard money and partially on soft money or grants. So that's always an issue every year because they have to reapply or see if they're going to get funded. Whereas we have the hardline funding from the state, we don't have to worry too much about that, although I'm sure everybody's heard about the problems in the state of Illinois. But I will say that for a long time we had plateaued. We were at just an even keel. And it wasn't really keeping up with the needs of the Latino community. And as you see and know, the growth of the Latino population, even though every year we'd ask for more money, we wouldn't get anything. And it really wasn't until we sort of decided ourselves to say, well, if we're going to get anything, we have to do it ourselves, really. And so this is the part that's always a little tricky, and it's different depending what state you're in or your institution. But you kind of have to do that whole beating the bushes, schmoozing. Like, I started traveling to Springfield, where our state capital is, meeting with the people that make the decisions. I remember one year when we were kind of seeing if we could get an increase in our budget, some people were telling us, oh, you've picked a terrible time because the state's in a crisis and there's no money and you shouldn't be asking. And at first I thought, oh yeah, I guess they're right, there's no money. Then I thought, I look around and I see there's development in certain areas, there's creation of new departments in certain areas. So it dawned on me that there's always money for something someone wants, for a pet project of a legislator or somebody that has deep deep pockets. So it's not necessarily that there's no money, but there's no money for you. So once I realized that, there's a lot of networking and schmoozing and being seen and all those things. You have to obviously have some quality programming, but part of it is also who you know and contacts. Because the last couple of years we did receive increase in our budgets, and I have to say it was due a lot to the community relationships we had, to the contacts, people that have come through the LARES program, either as students or staff, that really advocated for us. So that's how the increases were made.
Thanks for that. That's very useful. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions, Carly.
Sorry, guys, had to figure out how to unmute myself momentarily. So we have some questions that that specifically relate to how the LARES program, how it went through the examples process. So along those lines, can you touch a little bit upon picking the category you've applied under, talking about kind of some of your metrics, as in how your program compares to or how your program affects those Latinos who are not specifically in the program, and maybe a little bit about just kind of your data measurement process in general.
Well, I'll try to remember. It was quite a few years ago now. But I think what we had submitted had to do, and I'm not sure, I could be thinking about another program, but I think initially when we had submitted something, we weren't selected, but we didn't let it deter us. I think we submitted something again the following year, and that's when we received it. And it had to do with retention rates, and I think previously we might have submitted something else. But then at that time, we had somebody on our staff who had been looking at the retention rates and really noticed the impact noticed that the increase in retention for Latino students had been growing for the past several years, and some of the effects that we had in terms of our initiatives on that number. So that was what we had, I guess, hung our hat on, was a growing retention rate for Latinos for, I forget what the number of years was, but I think it's in the Excelencia database. And so that's something that we had submitted, and that's how we were selected for baccalaureate program. And I think in terms of the initiatives, I think it has to do with the bond that we create with students. Because one of the things that we're known for, I think, and we take pride in, is one, and it may seem like a no-brainer, which you should always do, but I think there's a difference between what people say and what you really do, is to try to make sure we put out quality information. So whatever we put out, we double check, try to triple check, make sure it's correct. So even people that may not be our allies at least have said, we may disagree with LARES, but their information is correct, or we know what they're putting out there is correct. Then I think the other thing was some of the initiatives that we have always, in general, we get a good response to whatever we're doing, whether it's a workshop or whether it's an event or whether it's something targeting students on probation. Because of the rapport we built with students, starting, as I mentioned, from their neighborhoods, we get a good turnout. And another, I think, a testament to our success is we're not located on the main campus. It's one really long block away from campus, or maybe like 2.5 city blocks. Students have to walk to get to our office. It's not much to us, I think, but students are always saying, oh, that's too far and this. But students are really under no obligation to come to LARES. So when I talk about LARES to either the administrators, other departments, other institutions, it's very different than the college. The student has to go to the college because that's where they're getting the degree from, and they have to meet certain criteria. The students come to us because of a value they see, a value they're getting, and they make that walk. So I always point that out, that we get the Latino students walking that distance to come to LARES because they know they're getting some value, some service, that we're providing for those students. We don't pay them to come here. They're not required because we're not their college. We've had in the past some of those things in place, mandatory advising, along with some changes that happened years ago in terms of our involvement in admissions. Those things were taken away, and we still get the students that make that, you know, in the students' words, make that long trek to see us in the offices here. And I think if I can add, you know, I'm trying to think of some of the things that are important, is we're lucky to have a committed staff that's passionate about the work they do. And I know that's easy to say, but my example would be that our staff are already involved in a lot of events and issues in the community. So when we bring them in and they're working in certain issues and events, or they're already engaged in that, we sometimes don't even have to ask them to attend something because it's something they've attended before. And that's important because the students see them in their communities. In fact, one thing I've been saying lately is that LARES offers a residential campus experience to Latino students because they see us here, they see us on campus, they see us in their communities, they see us at the events because we are engaged and involved, that it gives them experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for all that insight. We are out of time now, unfortunately. I know we have a number of questions that have gone unanswered. So promise that we're going to go through these questions and reach out to everyone individually. Hugo, if you don't mind, I may be forwarding some of these questions to you and connecting you with some of these folks that are really interested in all the great work you're doing over there.
Sure,
so I just really quickly, our next webinar is on what Excelencia looks for and examples of Excelencia submissions. We'll go a little more in depth for those of you that had questions about the profile submission process, about what we look for in this, the examples of Excelencia submission. I'll also connect with some of you directly. And then Lattice is a great example of looking at where your students are, what services you can provide, and how you can improve on those services by the use of data. So Lattice is a great example. It's exactly why we recognized them before, why we invited them to continue to tell their story to all of you. So once again, don't forget to nominate programs. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at examples@edexcelencia.org. If you have any questions for Hugo, again, here is his contact information. You can also reach out to us at examples@excelencia.org if you have any further questions. Once again, the webinar will be recorded and we'll be sharing that link out with all of you. Thank you, Hugo, for your time. And we look forward to learning about all these great practices that are working for Latino student success. Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.